Okay, this is part 14 of the Russian Revolution Guide, and today we are looking at war communism. This is when communism really starts to take off in Russia. This is when it's first introduced in a proper, serious way, in a way that goes on to shape the Soviet Union forever. So let's think about the context, okay? They are fighting this dangerous civil war. They are being fought by the whites on every single front. North, south, east, west, they are fighting white armies of one description or another. And what have the Bolsheviks got going for them? Well, they control the cities and they control some areas of farmland. But what have they lost? They've lost huge chunks of farmland to the white armies, and also they gave away lots of farmland, the best farmland in Russia, they gave to the Germans under the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk. So they really are struggling for food. And remember, Lenin had promised the people bread, peace, and land. So let's see how he introduces war communism into the areas the Bolsheviks control and how that makes an impact. But before we do, we must talk about a few key words, okay? So war communism is obviously what we're looking at. The state. If I mention the state, what do I mean? I mean the government, okay? State control means government control, not private control, not an independent business, not a Bill Gates or a Steve Jobs who controls a business and makes profits. None of that. State control, okay? Direct government control. Normally, depends on your country, depends on the history, it gets complicated, lots of crossover, but normally the government will control some things and private businesses will control other things. Under war communism and communism in general, the state, the government takes over everything. So when I talk about the state, I'm talking about government. If I talk about something called central planning, which is down here, that's the same sort of thing. It's when the government plans the economy centrally. Under a capitalist system, that there is no central planning, really. I mean, there's a little bit, but most planning for the economy is done by the market. People buying and selling things that they want or need, and that determines what factories get built, what shops are made, where the roads go, etc., etc. But under central planning, it's a person in an office inside government with a pen and a piece of paper writing out a plan for where things should go. We should have a factory here. This factory should make 10,000 widgets of stuff every single year. We should have another factory over there that makes shoes. We need to have another factory here. And then here we have a row of shops that sell the shoes, and so on and so forth. Okay? So there's advantages and disadvantages of both systems, and the communists try economic central planning, which is a very difficult thing to pull off successfully, and they have a limited amount of success. So let's take a look. So industrial policy, when I talk about industry, I'm talking about factories, okay? So factories and manufacturing, stuff that people that make stuff. So what do the Bolsheviks do? They take control of the factories under a central planning agency called the Supreme Economic Council. Now that's a bit interesting right there, because to do that, to centralize control in one council controlled by the Bolsheviks, they have to actually take control of the factories away from the local Soviets. The Bolsheviks had encouraged the workers inside factories to make their own councils, their own Soviets, and to control the factories themselves. But now they're saying, don't do that. Now they're saying, right, that period's finished. Local Soviet control is over, and instead, to fight this war, we need centralized planning by us, the Bolsheviks. So in a way, they're actually taking power away from the workers by doing this, which is kind of bizarre, considering that control to the workers has been the central idea behind the Bolsheviks. Anyway, so they take that power to control the factories and put it inside one council called the Supreme Economic Council. Then it gets even more strange, if you like, because the workers then have some of their rights taken away. They can't strike anymore. They can't choose what jobs they can do. I mean, they can't even choose really where they live. They introduced something called labor conscription. Now, we've seen conscription before in terms of people being forced to join the army, but now they introduce labor conscription, which means they're forced to join the labor force, e.g. work in factories or on farms, and they're told where to work and they've got no choice in the matter. So, people are forced to move cities to do the jobs the Bolsheviks want them to do. So they're losing power, the workers. They're losing some powers and they're losing rights over their working situation. So what are they getting in return? Well, food. And that's pretty important. So under Lenin and his war communism, they have quite strict rationing inside the cities. And because food, as we'll go on to see in the next section, agriculture was a big concern of people, the fact that the Bolsheviks could deliver enough food for them to live on was good enough for a lot of people. Yeah. So they've lost some rights to the Bolsheviks, but they're getting fed. And now that's pretty good. Yeah, that's for a lot of people, that's a deal worth making. And so they get some support from the cities, from the workers, despite these new harsh working conditions under communism. So, agricultural policy. What do I mean by agriculture? I mean the farms, okay, and the peasants. As we said before, they lost a lot of land in the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk. So what did they do? Well, the Red Army soldiers requisitioned the crops. Now, this is another strange thing because the Tsar's army requisitioned food to feed itself during World War I. And this made people hate the Tsar and his army. Now the Red Army is doing it too. They do promise to pay compensation later, but that's not enough. Lots of farmers do try to hide their food from the Red Army soldiers and inspectors so they don't have to give it away, so they can keep it for their families. I mean, the Red Army would leave enough food so the farming family would survive, but they'd never leave enough so they could sell any on or make a profit. So if you're a peasant, not really that great. You're trying to hide your food from these guys. And people that did hide it were caught hiding it were taken out and shot to serve as an example to the others. So pretty harsh life if you're a peasant here. But it does serve the Bolsheviks' need because they are able to increase the food that is coming from the farms into the cities. You can see there, it goes from 1 million tons of grain to 6 million tons 2 years later. So enough to feed the factory workers that are making the weapons and the munitions and the equipment the Red Army needs to fight the war. So war communism is effective at supplying the army with what it needs. It might not be very effective at creating happy farmers that are producing lots and lots, but it serves that short-term demand for food for the soldiers. So this fundamentally changes the Russian economy, and lots of people think this was deliberate, and that the war, actually, Lenin quite liked having the war going on in one way because it served as a perfect excuse to quickly rush out these emergency measures that looked like communism. Well, not looked like, they were communism. So, think about it. The Bolsheviks and the Mensheviks had been arguing for ages about how quickly should we, or could you, introduce communism into a country like Russia. Well, Lenin's just given you your answer. He's rushing it out in 2 years, which is incredibly quick to change, fundamentally change a country into a different political system, completely different political system and economic system. So huge change, and the Bolsheviks used this opportunity to bring that change in. You can see the sorts of changes here, everything controlled by the government, no profits for businesses. Money is even replaced in the cities with tokens for food or clothing, because remember, the communists believe that under a true communist system, or many of them do, you won't need money at all. People will receive what they need from the state and then work effectively for free, or in return for those needs to be met. So for lots of communists, ideologically, this war communism was fantastic and the war was a good excuse. Right, question for you there. Describe 2 features of war communism, and then there is a consequence question I'd like to have a go at on the next slide. Okay, good luck. Hope it helps.